Hello. Today we are talking to Protopriest Alexander Logunov of the Russian Orthodox Church here in Charlotte, North Carolina, dedicated to the icon of the reigning Mother of God. Bless, Father.
God bless.
Father, could you tell us about your priesthood, the story of it, and how you came to be a priest?
I wanted to be a priest when I was about 7 years old. My mother converted to Orthodoxy when I was 5. My godfather was Father Seraphim Rose. My mother and I were at Jordanville for a week, and I was like 7, 8 years old. And the next day we were leaving. We're leaving the monastery to go back home. And I was in the altar, and I was with Vladika Lavra. And I didn't want to leave. I was crying. And it was about that age, about 6 years old, that at that time, Archbishop Anthony of San Francisco saw I was getting in a lot of trouble outside with my mother. Archbishop Anthony of San Francisco sent status out and saved me and brought me into the altar. And it was there that those moments that we just don't kind of realize how they've changed, how little things like that change your life. I served there till I was 18 years old in the cathedral in San Francisco. I had wonderful friends, and then of course I had wonderful influences. And these men, really influenced my life. You would watch them by example, how much they loved to serve the church, how much they loved the church. There even came a certain point in my life that I even kind of drifted away from church. But always on Pascha and Rождество and holidays, I would go to church, I would go to confession, and I would go to communion. Here was another interesting point, that when all the time that Mashka and I were kind of growing up in the city in San Francisco, St. John has always been part of our life. And even when I was in the Navy and I would go to church, I would always go see, when I would come to the city, I would always go see St. John. And I would pray and ask for his help. Before Mashka and I got married, she asked me a question. She said, "So what is your dream? What do you want?" I said, I told her, I want to be a priest. I said, what do you want to be? She says, "I want to be a nurse." We became very active in the Greek church, but we kind of really felt out of place about a lot of different things. When I worked for Eastern Airlines, I lost my job, went to Miami, Father Daniel. And when we got a blessing to start a mission in Alabama, I called Vladika Alerion. And I said, "Vladika, we would like to start a blessing to start a mission, and how do we get a priest?" And he said, "Well, Father Daniel come up." I said, "Wow, okay." So Father Daniel would come from Miami on a train and come up there. So Mashka kind of told me, he said, "You're going to be a priest." I kind of joked about it too. And so we went out there, and I asked for a blessing to study for the diaconate. I sent the letter to Vladika, and we were supposed to go to a conference, and said, "You're going to be made a deacon." You're going to be made a deacon and everything else during that time. And then Vladika got the 2 letters. The first one he opened up, and it wasn't mine. He opened up somebody else's. So when I got there, I thought I was going to be made a deacon, and I found out later I wasn't going to. And at first I got upset, but then I realized, I was actually good with it. I said, this is God's will, and that's the way it's intended to be. And later on, that my father got ill. He was having a tough time traveling, and we went out to California, and everybody was signing off for me to be made a deacon. And at that time, Vladika Kirill said, I will do that. And Vladika Antonio said, "Absolutely not. I'm going to do it. This is one of my boys." He made the ordination, and then I was made a deacon. A year and a half later, we were at a conference, and then Vladika Gavril made me the priest. And even he's like, "No, maybe I was going to be the second priest," and he was a new bishop, and he was like, "I don't know." And during that time, and I said, "Well, Dick, whatever you choose. I'm good with it. I'm happy where I'm at." He says, "No." He said, "Later on during the day, let's do this." I said, "Okay. Are you sure, Vladika?" He goes, "Absolutely." This journey to the priesthood this journey to the priesthood and the influences that I have reminded me. I always make the joke to Matrushka that, if God did not make me a priest, I wouldn't be here today. Because of my simple personality is that if I have to be somewhere and I have an obligation to do it, I will be there. If I didn't have this obligation or something to do that, I'd be out on the street, drinking coffee, watching a football game, enjoying, drinking beer, eating pizza, and looking to satisfy my life with things rather than for the spiritual food and the things that we get. So God in His wisdom, and I said, God's got a wonderful sense of humor in His wisdom, made me a priest because He knew this is the only way that I can save Sasha.
Father, what is your favorite gospel?
My favorite gospel is the prodigal son. That gospel describes my life. Mashkami even made a point one time. She says, when I was growing up, if she saw me on the street, she would walk to the other side. I was not a very kind man. And during that time, I left the church. I really did. I didn't want to have anything to do with the church. I really was a very angry young man. There were a lot of things that happened. I became very judgmental, very bitter. And I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. Plus, I said I can live my life better. I rejected everything that God was telling me to do. So when I read that gospel of the prodigal son, that's my life. I lived with the pigs. I ate with pigs. I understand that. So when people come into the church and they're suffering and they're hurting, I understand. I understand what it means to be cruel to somebody. I understand what it means to hurt somebody tremendously. I understand what it is to live in filth with pigs. I understand what it is to be a pig. That is the thing that I know. But then the saving point is, and then the light bulb goes off. This is the church. God is forgiving. Sometimes when we all walk into the church, and our weakness is we judge other people, but when we walk into the church is here to save us and to help us. The church is not here to condemn us. The church is here for our salvation. And I started to realize that. I started to realize and understand God's love and God's mercy.
Father, during your tenure as priest, you've met a lot of old generation Russians, those that fled the country after the 1917 revolution or after World War II. Kind of compare those old generation Russians to the new generation Russians, which are the people that came to America typically after the Soviet Union ceased to exist.
I grew up around old generation Russians. Totally different from the Russians that came over after the collapse of communism. People don't realize when the first generation of Russians that came over to America, what they went through and what they had to go through. When they came to America, you have to remember this is the height of the Cold War. Everything Russian is bad. America was very anti-Russian. Kind of a lot of situations that when I was growing up, a lot of things that I hear now. And Russians were not able to get any good jobs. A lot of Russians were cleaning toilets, doing garbage work, doing anything that they could because they would not hire them and they would look at them as strictly as communist. And so it was a very difficult time. But one of the things that the old generation did is the first thing, no matter where they went, they built a church. The new generation that came, they knew nothing about church. They knew there was church, and they knew it to be Orthodox, and it was something, but they had no concept. The old generation had the concept of church. There was church all the time, and then the new generation that came over had no idea about church, any concept of it. And they were just like any other convert that would come to America, or American convert that would come to the Orthodox Church, knew nothing about the church. And they knew that they would come to the church and say, I want to be baptized. And they said, and why do you want to be baptized? Well, it was like a right. It was almost like a constitutional right. You know, I'm Russian, so I should be baptized, and I need to be Orthodox. But as time has gone on, they have become a lot like the old generation of wanting to build churches and coming to church and to do all that. And that comes from the Russian church in Russia and reestablishing these things. It's just about being taught. So the old generation, the new generation, in all actuality, as time has passed, there's really no different, because they're living their life inside the church. So there's not much difference.
Father, it's known that after several generations, many of the old Russian descendants do not attend church. They seem to drift away. Is there a way to prevent this or manage this to slow the process down?
There comes a certain point that there is no way to slow down the process. Everybody looks to the priest or to the church to kind of solve this problem. The problem starts at home. The parents need to bring their kids to church, their children to church. The parents need to bring their children and involve them in church life. But if we have our life and we live it outside the church, we get what we have grown. If you look at a simple garden, like a vegetable garden, or you look at your animals, if we don't take care of our animals, if we don't go out there and pick the weeds out of our vegetable garden and to water it and to nurture it and everything, what happens? It dies. It dies. And the same thing that happens, that if we don't take care of our children, and to establish that point that the church and God is a very central part of their life, kids will leave. I see a lot of things. I'll give you a perfect example. I see things in Charlotte, and Russians have a huge Russian school, but it's basically a secular Russian school. They keep things culturally, but people don't realize that the church and culture are very intertwined. You can't separate them. Russian culture, even today, is from the church. If you don't bring your children to church, how are they going to know God? It's impossible. Their children, they reach a certain age, 18, 19, they're going to do what they want to do. But there'll become a certain time that little bit by little bit, they want to come to church. There's something deep inside, and they'll find their way. But it has to start at the very beginning. And the very beginning is when we realize that a mother is having a child. She needs to come to church. Go to communion as often as possible. The child hears the music. Understand, it's not something foreign. It's familiar. Then the child gets baptized, goes to communion, plays with the kids on Sunday, comes to Russian school. And, all these things play a part. You can't bring a child to me at 14 years old and ask me, Father, fix my child. One, the child doesn't know me, doesn't want to have anything to do with me. It has to start from the very, very beginning.
Father, how do you as a priest see the evolution of our church going forward?
I see this process is taking time. And sometimes we don't realize this is God's way also, is patience. But at the same time, we don't realize how far that we have come in a short while of 10 years. We expect a lot of times that we should have a church built and we should have all these things done. It just doesn't happen that way. It took us, almost 3 years, I guess, to try to get just the engineering plans done for the church. Now we have to save to build, the first pour, the first stage of building the church, get the foundation and everything else. Everything takes time, and the big thing is a lot of it is impatience. The Greeks are very smart. They're very efficient in what they do, as far as that goes. The first thing that the Greeks did is they built a hall, and they built that hall first, and they put their services there, and then from there they make sure they have their Greek festival, and the Greeks are very, very supportive for their church. So that is one thing that that we have to learn from that, is that dedication, that when they put their effort forward, they really do. And that is an example that we also need to learn and to make that sacrifice. Then it goes back again to that original point. From the old generations that had to build the church, there was no money coming in. There were old generations, Russians, even my own father did it. Took a second mortgage out against his house to donate to the church to help build the cathedral in San Francisco. These are things that I saw that was being done as my youth, and that the stories that I heard, and the same things that the Greeks do, and they do it fabulously. Got to give them credit.
Father, if you had a few important sentences to say to our parishioners, what would they be?
Dostoevsky's spiritual father told him one of the most important things never to do is to lose hope. We are watching right now in parts of America, which I love greatly, that people have lost hope. So for us, we are very fortunate in our life that we have the church to help us with that. But if we choose to separate ourselves, we lose hope. So I know a lot of times that when we look at things in our church and we're not building fast enough, or things are very difficult in our life, our family members are sick, and everything else is that, we should not lose hope. We should thank God that we have the church and we have a family, and that our family is here to help us, to pray for us, but also that we don't realize that as a priest, that during proscomedia, when somebody says, "Bacho, can you please pray for me?" That, and we write our name down, that we remember you always, even when you're not here, or even when you leave this world. Remember, the church does not forget us. The church remembers us always. And when I'm not here, and the next priest is here, that he will continue to pray for us. So why should we lose hope? There is nothing but hope and great things. Remember, we don't live our life for this world. We live our life for the next world, to be with God. And that is what we're constantly praying for and hoping that we change our life to be with God. Amen.